I'd like to bring this meeting to order. It's the Committee of the Whole meeting, the Village of Villa Park Board of Trustees, December 12th, 2022. Clerk Konecki, please call the roll.
Trustee Salella?
Here.
Trustee Corkery?
Here.
Trustee Kozar?
Here.
Trustee Kumar? Trustee Murphy?
Here.
Trustee Patrick?
Here.
President Kazone.
Here. And please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll move on to our one discussion item, the review of Lions Rec Center costs and funding sources. And a detailed memo was issued that recommends the village borrow no additional funds for the project and instead divide the costs between two sources. Non-home rule sales tax can be legally used for infrastructure costs such as water, sewer, stormwater, sidewalks, and access roads. Remaining funds will be paid for from general fund revenues in calendar year 2024 and unreserved fund balance in the general fund. And I'd like to turn this over to Director Gola.
Well, I was gonna do a quick introduction.
Turn it over to Manager Harline now.
Yeah, and then I'll call on Greg.
Okay.
It was about a year ago that we were in a situation of how to choose how much money to borrow to bridge the gap between the $10 million grant from the state and the estimated cost of the project. We had information at that time from Williams Architects as to costs to do most of the things that people had said during public input hearings that they wanted, and the direction from the elected officials. At that time, there was a change in leadership, and with the information available to those who were able to make the decision, you guys were in a little bit of a difficult situation to go forward at that point. But the best guess was to borrow about $7.3 million. And since then, as we've tried to value engineer the cost down, but costs have increased, and looked at some things that should be in, should be out of the project, we now find ourselves instead of a $17.3 million project, a $19.8 million project, or the other option. We can talk about that if you like, but I think the decision was basically, let's not gut the project of vital parts like the basketball court. So we looked at some different options, and I'll let Greg and Finance Director Howard speak to those, but Greg has been the only one through the project all the way through, but his role has been primarily in design of the facility and not as much on the financing. And then Director Howard came in late in the process of the financing. So the direction, after we actually went to Spear Financial and looked for a what it would cost to borrow the money to bridge the new gap, and interest rates are now at or above 5% estimated. The cost to borrow the money for the amount that we needed to borrow was to get $2.5 million. Our interest costs would have been close to $1.8 million, which the ratio is much worse than the previous borrowed amount. So we're at the point of looking for what other options we have, and with that, I'll let Greg and Director Howard, and then we also have representatives here from Williams and WB Olson, and that can also speak to the differences in how we could change the costs, or what the advantages of sticking with what we have before us. So I'll let Greg go first and talk about the rec center project as it is before us now.
Thank you, Manager Harline. Good evening. So we started this the process in February when we met with Williams and staff, and we put together our wish list of all our programming needs. And at that point, Williams did the conceptual drawings. And the building was about 42,000 square feet. And so, of course, with the 42,000 square feet, with the budget at the time, I think when Williams made their proposal, the estimated square footage cost to build a rec center was about $350 a square foot. Where at today, it's upwards of $450 a square foot, $485, somewhere around there. So anyway, in the process, what we did was start removing some of the items. We had Olson came on board. They had the specific contacts with their local contractors that gave them some current pricing of some of the materials, what it's going to cost, and so that was that allowed us to see a clearer picture on the cost of the building. So what we did was remove some areas of smaller program space. We had a birthday party room that we're going to incorporate into one of our classrooms. We had the gym was big enough for 3 square width-wise basketball courts. We went down to 2 basketball courts with a full-length basketball court in the middle. We also made some engineering decisions with Williams on the size of the hallways, locker rooms, those type of things. So we went through the whole process up until a few months ago. We came up with a building that would still suit our needs. We didn't lose any of the program space except for one birthday party room. We also have included an area that can be planned for future expansion. So down the road, we have the ability to add on a few more classrooms. But that's where we're at with staffing and a little bit of the process. Director Howard can talk to you more about the financing. I can answer any questions you may have right now about what staff went through. If you have any, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Trustee Solella.
Hey, Greg, under building cost savings, I noticed that we've got bullet points on areas in which were addressed for cost savings. Is there an individual dollar amount attached to each of these? Like the revision of the locker room, is there a dollar that we can associate that with?
Do we have the individual costs, Dan?
I don't have the list, but I mean, there's a number of them that we probably, I don't have the list.
Okay.
Yeah, we can get you those.
I'd just be interested to see what dollar amount we're saving for what we're giving
for
up.
each area.
Yeah.
Yep, can get you those.
That's it.
Trustee Kumar.
I was really concerned about the loss of the running track. That was a unique thing. And quite frankly, we went from 350 to 450, which is close to, it seems, almost a $100 increase, a 33% increase in supply or square footage cost, which is not even close to what, is predicted elsewhere. So I'm wondering if the initial cost was just wrong, that they chose the 350 was a misestimate, or it's actually increased in 33%, and I'm wondering if someone could address.
Yeah,
I mean,
we could have Williams address that.
Yeah,
I mean, if you look at in light of since January of this year to now, I mean, gas prices are out of control. Paying for
No, I understand that.
So everything's gone up.
No,
The
no,
supply chain is an issue.
Yeah,
Cost of lumber, all that stuff. But they can,
groceries have gone up too. We all know that, but there's a percentage they go up by, and this is like astronomical. I mean, it's like it's gone up 1/3%, which seems a little high for me, even by. Now, is that because the 350 was a low estimate to begin with, or it's actually gone up by 33% across the board, and there is some evidence of that? I just want to see that.
actually, Andrew or even Dan, he's in the front lines as far as the supply.
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out where and what has gone up that much, because that's, that's a significant increase, which is way above what, the current.
I'll let Dan
Yeah.
answer those questions.
I think to start, at least, I don't know where 350 was, but I know when we were brought on, things were targeted at about a 40,000 square foot building for $16 million. So that was about 400. I think we're in the 450 or 435 range
Okay.
after now, so I don't think it's quite.
Yeah, because the 350 to 450 then is a huge jump, and
Not all building material prices track to what we hear in the press for inflation, 11% or 7%. We've seen steel prices over the last year go up somewhere in the neighborhood of 50%. They've started to come back down. We've seen concrete recently run up 25, 30%. Plastics and mechanical equipment, some of it's up 40%, some of it's up 15%. So it's hard to say that it's just this. You'd have to look at a broad scope of everything.
well, I mean, the average comes from everything, right? As
But the
usual.
average in construction, and I did just get an article about a week ago, is about double what we're hearing. So when it was about 11%, on average, construction costs were up about 25%. Now it's still up about 14 or 15% than it was a year ago. But that's, you're picking at little things.
Okay, no, and so it's, building costs are one of the inflation aspects, and the other is labor, which has definitely gone up also. Is this being assessed between labor and building costs, or just a
Yes.
single
No,
aspect?
the costs that we used in the budgeting pick up everything. We go out to the trades and say, excuse me, at this time frame when the building's anticipated to be built, based upon what your labor contracts are, they figure their labor based upon what they expect it to be at that point. Same with material costs.
So we're around 437 at this point per square foot.
I think it's in that range.
It's in that range. And what is the standard deviation on that range? Do you guys have any idea?
That can be highly variable because, again, it just based on what your infrastructure is as part of your project, right? You could have a building that has all of the very high costly materials and another building that's very economical. So
No,
you might be like, I don't know, what would we say now? Like 425 to 525 for this type of building, depending on the level of finishes.
No, my fear here is not the 470, 437, or we are, agreeing to the budget or whatever. My fear here is there is a prediction of a 7% increase over the next year, right? And where are we going to cut again if that happens? And what is going to happen in that process? Is this locked in? None of this is clear at this point, which is very concerning because every time you give a little less to the people of Villa Park, and I obviously don't want to give them less. Yeah.
And none of us do.
Yeah.
I can't answer what it's going to, I think I answered this last time we were here too.
I mean, you can't tell.
I can't predict, but all I can say is what we are seeing. And we are seeing the majority of construction costs at least level off and stop increasing.
Yeah.
Some still are, some have come down, but on the whole, things are starting to be much more uniform the way they held for years.
You're right, and you never know, the costs may go down next year. If a recession hits the first quarter, you may be seeing lower prices.
Some things could come down, right.
But I have seen that too, where things have kind of leveled off, a few things are starting to drop in my business. So
I mean, we saw so far through December a fairly significant drop in the price of gas and the price of diesel fuel. Diesel fuel is a very big component of construction costs. If that continues, that will help. If there is a recession, that will help at least tame, the runaway prices. I try to tell everybody, nothing's going back to where it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, at least in the near future. Prices don't work that way. But
Many of our supply chain issues are because certain countries are not, were closed for a long time. And now they're opening up again. So some of that might also, I think, feed into lower costs eventually when the supply chains open up.
some of it hopefully does. I mean, a lot of bits and pieces that go into the materials we use come from many different countries. A lot of the stuff comes here and there are, as everybody hears, there's essentially full employment. Nobody can get all the people they need. That affects production. That affects some of the supply chain issues that we're having, and therefore the price still. But hopefully we continue to see it come down, and as we finish going through design, we continue to see some of the benefits of that.
Okay, and this amount includes the contingency or not?
Yes.
It does. And what is the contingency amount? What percentage is the contingency at?
No, I think we're I think we're at 10 right now.
Yeah, I thought we had 10 originally in
I
there.
think it's 5% design contingency and 5% construction.
At this point, as we go through design and design finishes, hopefully everything's able to stay right there. The design one can drop off. You always want to go into the construction end with a contingency for things, but.
Okay, and the track, what is the pricing on the track? Because that's my main thing that's dropped here, that's a big issue, in my opinion. Everything else is basically a little bit of a design change, not too much of a loss to what would be public space, public.
And one thing to clarify before we answer that is for the track, unless you object, we fully intend to design and engineer the track so that it's part of the bid documents, so that you actually would get real pricing, exactly what the track is going to cost on bid day, so that if you would like, then and you can afford to, you can accept that alternate and actually build the building with the track if costs are advantageous. And if costs are not advantageous, because it's an alternate bid, we will have actually engineered the building to receive the track economically. In other words, we'll still design all the floor joists to be able to support the track, so that you can easily add it in the future. So I just wanted to clarify that we would engineer that.
So the track would be able to be installed later.
Right.
And either design, it's going to be there.
Right. It'll be designed and bid as an alternate,
Right.
where if all the pricing is favorable, it's there and it's in.
So what are the things, one, the track is being installed so that it could be a design bid. What other things are going to be designed? Because there was a discussion about the expansion. What about that?
Exactly. So if you remember our floor plan, the bulk of the building is on the gym and on the south side. And if you look towards the north, towards the park, there's only a single story there. So we will be designing the building for that single story, that roof structure, where the roof terrace is going to be located, and that the roof terrace is another example of one of those alternate items that we'll design that you could fully build out if you can afford to, and if not, you could add the roof terrace. But the building structure will be designed to actually receive a complete second floor in the future to expand your programs.
So we only have one floor right now, or we have one floor on just one side?
On that part of the building, if you remember, there's that
Yeah.
east-west corridor that
Yeah.
runs across the second floor. To the south is the fitness center, to the south is the dance and the group
Okay,
act
so
studio.
those rooms are still there?
Those rooms are all still there. To the north, there's a section of building down below where the two general programs are on the first floor.
Mm-hmm.
Right on top of that is where you will be able to expand the building in the future.
And so that'll be kind of an empty space, and there will be like an entry to a...
Correct, it would just be, it'll either be roof or roof terrace / roof.
Okay,
And then in the future, that can actually become a full second floor.
floor, okay.
So what's the savings of leaving out the construction of the track estimated at?
I'd have to go back
I'd
and
have
look
to
at our
look.
spreadsheet. I didn't print out a copy, but we could look, if you just give us a moment, we could actually look that up. Yeah.
And just our train of thought on the track, if we could save on constructing if we need to, there is the ability for residents to still walk around the gym. Usually, a lot of our seniors will walk in the morning. And that's probably not a high usage for the basketball courts, so they can still walk around the basketball court. And we do have our treadmills that we'll have in the fitness room as well.
No, I understand that, but
So there are still.
it's a great feature
Yes.
that we really were kind of, I think I was excited about, and many people had marked that as a feature that they were tremendously excited about. And it's kind of, I mean, being diminished, and it's not something I would like to diminish if we didn't have to, right?
I agree totally. But those are some of the hard decisions that we have to
Yeah,
make.
right.
And the fact is that we still can offer the ability for residents to walk indoors around the basketball court. Probably wouldn't want to do that in the evening because of the programs.
Yeah, it's a timing thing also.
Correct.
The problem with that is, if you remember, that there was the whole structure that was built at Willowbrook, and initially, we were supposed to be able to use that structure for programming. It's just that Willowbrook has all its classes running, and the timings we get are 6:30 in the morning to 7:30, not the ideal timing necessarily for seniors to walk around the track. They might want a better timing to do that.
Right.
So what happens when you double use a space is that, and so then it doesn't give them the ideal walk, whereas the track will always give them the ideal time, because they can always walk, 100% of the time. Whoever wants to do that with families, timing doesn't become an issue.
Agreed.
And we're building a building so people use it.
Yep.
Yes.
No, I totally agree with you, Trustee Kumar.
And I understand it's a hard decision.
But there is the
I
ability.
just want to know, what is the cost, what is the possibilities, how do we fund for that in the future, and all that.
Right.
So we need to,
The savings is $450,000.
450,000.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay.
So, like I said, we don't want to lose it, but it's a pretty big chunk of change.
No, I
And we
understand.
still have the ability,
Yeah, as long as we have the ability to-
and usually our programming will start after school, for the gym space, basketball programs, that type of thing. So really, when we open at 6:30 in the morning or 6 o'clock, the availability to walk around the gym, walk around the basketball court,
Yeah,
without
'cause
seeing
I'm
the
hoping our seniors will
schedule.
also play pickleball and whatever it is over there. I mean, it's not gonna, you want it to be able
Right.
to be used, so,
Yep.
and so I just don't want, programs being cut so people can walk or walking,
No,
yeah, so.
well, we
it's
want to
just-
maximize all our programming.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Trustee Patrick?
Were there any potential cost savings if the track was built on the ground level?
Well, if we included the track around the basketball court, you're asking? Well, there would be the savings of the 450 for the elevated track, and we would probably put a netting around there. So if there's pickleball, that type of thing going on, it would be the cost of the netting.
Has that been considered as part of any of your alternative?
We have discussed the netting around the,
No, not the netting, a ground level track.
well, it would have to be around the basketball court, yes.
Have you considered that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Trustee Solano?
Just one thing, is there any other costs you can give us for the building cost savings? I had asked earlier, and it seemed we didn't have them, but we had one for the track. Is there any other ones that you may be able to provide us with this evening that you're aware of? So we have some sort of number to put to these cost savings?
Yeah, I think there was presented in the,
It was in the full packet.
yeah, in the packet.
The full spreadsheet. Yep.
I don't know.
Wait, in the meantime, while they're looking, maybe
Trustee
Director
Kozar.
Howard can talk
Well,
about.
first of all, I haven't gotten any spreadsheets on any of these pricing differences or anything of the such. However, this is all really confusing too, because you guys did spend a lot of time in putting together a really good presentation, not only for us, but for the community. We've put a lot of time and effort into this, and we promised the community a certain product. At the end of the day, we really need to get it as close to that as we can. So right here, from my point of view though, I just have a memo that just says reduced building area, more efficient floor plan, reduction in size of lobby and circulation areas, revised gym construction materials, elimination of running track, revisions to locker rooms, areas, etc. I have not seen anything that would help me understand this anymore, any kind of new presentation like the others that would show us a visual of what we are getting or what you're proposing that we're getting. Again, we promised our residents this.
Sure.
Now, I understand inflation is something that is somewhat out of our control, but again, you said this process started in February, and we haven't had enough foresight in a year to think about inflation costs. I think Trustee Kozar said at the last meeting is that I felt like we've been sold a bill of goods.
Hang on,
That's
hang on,
not
hang on.
true.
No,
That's
I
not
don't
true.
want to hear, that's not what's going on here, and we're not,
Well, I'm
we're
still
not,
speaking, I'm still speaking my
I know,
point
but
about this.
I would like to,
So-
you don't,
So-
that was
but I'm
brought up
still
last
speaking,
time.
But I'm still speaking.
I know, but I am parliamentary in here, I can interrupt you.
Take over.
I think we don't need to be talking about a bill of sales that have been, a bill of goods that have been sold to us. Inflation is one thing, but
Okay,
let's
well,
keep our
I'm
comments.
speaking on
let's keep
behalf
our
of the
comments.
residents here at Villa Park and what I'm being told, as well as what I'm feeling. So what I'm getting at, though, is that we have nothing but a memo here showing us what you're telling us. We can't see this, we can't visualize it, we don't have any concepts or plans drawn out to show us the differences in sizes, to show us what it's like to eliminate these rooms or a track like that. I think if you want us to make accurate and informed decisions that's the best for the community, we need to see that information. So you're talking about spreadsheets, where are those?
Well, they're working on design development now, and a month or so ago, Williams gave you a presentation on what the building was going to look like. So if you want to have specifics, I can answer, like you talked about, you mentioned the locker rooms. So the original design was to do what's up and coming is individual spaces for families. One locker, one shower per family instead of your traditional locker rooms. That was more expensive. So, and even though it's kind of a new trend, and we liked it, we said, well, we can't afford 10 separate locker rooms for individual families. We're going to have to go the old route and do normal locker rooms. So that was a cost savings.
But all we see is a memo.
I agree, but as far as the design, that's what they're working on now. That's where, I think Andrew can probably, better than I can, explain some of the cost savings, the value engineering. They did point that out in the presentation. There was no, I don't think he included any numbers.
We didn't put any numbers in the presentation,
So,
but we have all those numbers.
we-
because
we'll-
we have to just basically attach them to the number.
But we have, the thing to understand at this,
Come on up.
Could you please, yeah, come on.
at this level of design, we don't have all the details to put specific numbers to each component and each change. We send this out to contractors, and they look at it, they read the narrative and say, okay, if there's 10 individual locker rooms, and they're guessing at a lot of stuff because it's not designed yet. So when we say, let's go from this to this, we take a square footage price out. So it's hard to say at the level we're at that each locker room saves, and I'm just using a number, $10,000. The running track is a little bit different because it's a real defined piece that you can take out and say, I've got about this much steel, I've got this much material. So it's a little easier, and that we assigned a value to. But some of the broader scope changes that were made as we went through, as Williams was going through design development, are priced on a square footage type basis with information from trade contractors. And we say, okay, we're going to shrink the building, that shrinks corridors. I can't tell you what shrinking the corridor saved outside of everything. We reduced the size of the electrical service. And again, there's many components that go with that, so I can't say it was this amount of money just for this part of that, but it's in part. So it's very hard right now to take all these individual things and say there's a definitive value to it. We have targets that we're shooting at for that. As the design furthers and we do an updated DD budget in February or March, when we get to that point, we'll have much more information. It's going to be much easier to be able to assign costs to specific scopes that you're looking for, that you might want to see back, that are much more meaningful than they are at this point.
One of the things that is important to me, and I believe it's important to a lot of other people, especially our residents here, is that we did take a lot of time to be transparent with this process. We gave our residents the opportunity to come here, tell us what they wanted, what they saw. Now, I know that we're under a time constraint here, but moving forward with all of these decisions, we are not getting what we came out to set out to do. So how are we going to give our residents that option again to come back and tell us what they would like with all of these new issues that are popping up here?
Well, everything that is in the design phase right now, other than, a smaller basketball court and the walking track, everything that we've talked about has been provided. And then when Williams gave their presentation a month or so ago, the idea was that they're going to come back in mid-February or early March as they do the design, as the design development continues, where they have a better idea of the numbers, that they were going to give an updated presentation where you're going to have those specific numbers.
What is our deadline date? When do our decisions have to be made? When's the very last date?
There is no deadline as far as decisions. There's a deadline to construction completion, which was originally April of 2024. However, when we talked to the DNR, we couldn't start anything because we didn't have the grant agreement in place, and I have that email from them. You cannot start anything except for design development and conceptual design with architectural and construction management, but you couldn't start construction. So we didn't get that. We didn't get that email until.
And I think if I'm trying to understand what I think Trustee Patrick is saying is, what's our deadline to decide what's in and what's out in terms of this?
Okay.
In terms of this, is that closer to what you're talking about? Because so far the only thing we're talking about, the only thing that's really been cut during the value engineering that was from the designs from after the public input meetings has been the track.
Walking track.
The walking track.
The concepts and the designs that you're talking about possibly eliminating tonight, those are going to be presented to us in February?
Well, it's not being eliminated. It's still being.
Well, it's different than the original plan.
Just
So that's,
the walking track, it's not being eliminated, but it's going to be bid, and that's one of the add-ons.
An
An alternate bid. So that's the only thing that's changed, other than the construction of, like, the locker rooms I mentioned, or, we had a bigger front entrance.
but those are all changes to the original design.
They are, from the conceptual design, sure.
So-
But there's still going to be a front desk, it's just not going to be as big.
So February is when we, as a board,
February
should
or
expect
early
to
March
see
is
the new
when
designs for,
they'll have a better handle on the design, because they're in design development right now.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think what Trustee Patrick, and I was kind of under the impression too, was that tonight we were going to see some of those, at least conceptual and some dollar signs, because that's why we came back tonight. I think that's probably what Trustee Patrick was kind of getting at. The reason we did another, presentation tonight was that we thought, at least I thought, and I don't know, maybe Trustee Patrick did, that we would get some of those tonight. But we probably won't get those conceptual ideas
Right,
until.
and that was talked about at the last,
Yeah.
the conceptual presentation.
Yeah.
That in the next few months there's going to be more of a finite
Yeah.
figures
Okay.
as far as what it's going to cost.
So, yeah, so we can look at, hopefully, end of February, beginning of March,
March.
we'll be able to have some more hard numbers.
Yeah, and I'll let Dan speak to that, because they're the guys that are putting together the numbers.
Yeah, and we're working with Williams right now to define exactly when that will be, but Williams is currently working in design development, bringing through these things. And as that goes through, I mean, we continue to look at things as they present them, but that's more on an information of, okay, we're still on track to this, we're not on track to that. We won't have real numbers until they have pretty much finished design development, and we can go back out to the market and really gauge those.
Okay.
So when will our residents have the ability to give their input on the project outside of a public comments on a stated board meeting? Are we planning on having any kind of other public forums or meetings open for discussion and that such? Or is this it?
Well,
And there's a couple of trustees who have been, first of all, the direction we got from the last meeting, from what I understood, was we looked at some things that possible major changes in terms of the structure based on the cost of trying to keep it at the $17.3 million. And every single one of those major changes, from what I heard of this discussion in this room, was not to cut those things. At that meeting, what was presented to you with these designs that was in that presentation and the breakdown of the costs of where the $19.8 million was that we were not going to make a major cut to the facilities, and that one of the things the staff was requested to do was come back for funding options. So the thrust of the memo from tonight was funding options to get to the same facility with minor changes, design changes, which we would typically put in the hands of design professionals as to how large the lobby should be to get to the costs, as opposed to, I don't think we want to have a public, you're not talking about a public discussion about how large the lobby should be. You're talking about a public discussion to make sure all the major elements are in the facility. So the one element that has been removed at this point is the walking, the walking track, the suspended walking track. So, when we get in February, if the economy improves, if some things turn our way, if we come up with we're going to also try and apply for grant funds. There are some grant funds out there. If we get some of these things, it's possible we could add back the track. It's possible that we're going to have some, if things go worse, we're going to have some difficult decisions to make in February. The purpose of bringing this discussion back to you as requested by the board back in November and again here in December was to make sure that they are on the right track in terms of how they're designing the building. So there's no attempt to not have transparency, but the detail of each decision that they make when they meet every 2 weeks, we have not burdened the elected officials with that, nor would that be I don't think that would be a very productive discussion, because there's a lot of numbers they've gone through. I haven't attended all the meetings, but I've attended a couple of them, and I've seen at every single meeting they're going over a bunch of details and punch lists and different items and how much things are going to cost and keeping. So we brought back the discussion in November because in October, November, they did another analysis of the costs, and it was vastly different. It was significantly different from where we had secured funding. So that was the need to come back to the board. And I know some other people are waiting.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes, it was my understanding the objective of this meeting was to discuss where additional funding would come from, not what modifications to this design would be. We've got 6 minutes left, and I would very much like to hear from the finance director, please.
Thank you for repeating what he said.
Now, the reason for the memo was just as Manager Harline said, is that our duty in this is to get to that number that we have been assigned to, and the way of doing it is a tricky or a challenging one. We can increase the level of debt for the village for that to get to the number that we need to. We can use sales tax funds for specific purposes, as we've stated earlier. or we can do a combination of those to get us there and then supplement those funds with general fund revenues. And we can still do that in this case. We can use general fund revenues that are tracking very well for us to get to where we need to go. If we're going to move that number, then there are other calculations to do. There are other things that we need to look at to get to that number. And it appears in the discussion that we're having now that we're still in that design phase to do that. But given the parameters we had, this is what you see in the memo and this is what you're looking at. So,
Trustee Corkery.
So one of the things that the memo talks about is allocating some sales tax funding to the project.
that's correct.
I'm certainly not opposed to that. I was just curious, are there any other infrastructure projects that might be put on hold or delayed or anything?
Well, one of the things that puts us in this situation is because we're still operating and we still have other things that we need to do. We're in the middle of capital funding for some of the vehicles that we need. So we're setting up a specific leasing program to get those numbers in without incurring general obligation debt. So that's another component. We talked about in our last meeting the DSEP bonds and those rollover bonds. So, you know, that is going on, and there are certain things. We've got the original debt for this project that's out there, and they all become part of our debt funding. And it really is a responsible thing for us and our staff to make sure that if we're incurring debt, it's at a level basis, it's at something that doesn't affect our community dramatically for any one instance. And as things roll off, we roll on for our needs, but we don't, we try to do responsible funding and level funding, and I think that's something that our residents really appreciate.
If I can just add one real quick thing, this sales tax that we're talking about is the capital sales tax that was raised for water, sewer, and streets projects, and that's all that these funds can be used for, and it's only those parts of this project that fit under that direction. So that's, you know, as estimated, we could probably use $1 million towards that, and yes, it would put some, I can't tell you which, but water, sewer, stormwater project, street project, there'll be $1 million less to do some of those things. I mean, there's no, you know, I don't want to, there is a cost.
Trustee Kozar.
So our total building size is not diminished, correct?
Building size is slightly smaller than our original.
Could you please come up and talk?
Yeah, sorry. The building size is smaller than our original presentation. That's one of the areas that we looked at to reduce
So
cost.
the original presentation was how many square feet?
I think originally we were around 39,000 square feet, and then the building grew after talking to staff, as oftentimes is the case in schematic design. People's needs or wants are always big, right? When you go to buy a home or a car, you want as
Well, when
much
we-
as you can afford.
I'm just talking about when we did our final vote to raise the 7.5 million
Yeah.
plus or minus. What was our, what?
I think the
at that
building
time,
square
what was our
footage was
building
about
size?
40 or 41,000 square feet.
Okay, and what is it currently?
Right now, we're down to right about 37,000 square feet.
So that's considerable.
But the efficiencies are ones that we have saved in the design of the plan. As we've evolved the plan, as is typically the case when you come up with a schematic design, you improve the plan as time goes by. One of the ways we've improved the plan is to create better efficiency of the plan and the way that the rooms and spaces and corridors and stairs and lobbies are arranged. So a lot of that square footage savings was not taken out of program space. There was some program space, as Greg mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. The
So-
original gym had 3 basketball courts.
In either event, though,
Yeah.
we're going from 41,000 to 37.
Correct.
That's about a reduction of 10%.
That's correct.
When you
Yeah.
gave conceptual pricing
Mm-hmm.
back in, what, February, something like that? It was just conceptual, because you didn't
Correct.
have any bids at that time, right?
Correct.
And you don't have any bids now.
That's
It's still
correct.
conceptual.
It's still conceptual
It was Conceptual
pricing.
then, it's conceptual now.
Correct.
As far as funding, I appreciate the fact that you guys were able to sharpen your pencils and find ways to potentially do this without incurring debt. That's great. There is a pathway for it. I don't think tonight we're voting on any of that, but you've shown us that there is a potential that we can get what we want. And at least we can strive for that. Greg, I know you've sharpened your pencil a lot on this, and you've worked hard to try to see what can be most efficient. I think that certain things were mentioned earlier on in this discussion about, being presented with one thing with speculative costs, and now we're being presented something else with speculative costs. So we still don't know what the final numbers are going to be, but already we're being asked to pay for more. So I think that's where that comment that I know President Cazone objected to about being sold a bill of goods, I think that's where that's derived from, that we were given something originally and now we're told something different, but we don't have hard numbers to back it up. So I think that's just where that's coming from. Tonight, our purpose was just to talk about funding options, right? So we're not making any decisions on what we're cutting or not cutting.
Correct.
And we're just looking for a pathway that, in the event that your pricing was so different then than it is in another 6 months, we have a pathway of how we can achieve that if we need to do that. I would like to see the building stay at about 40,000 square feet. Steel prices have gone down since January from about $420 a ton to $364 a ton. We all know gas prices have gone down. Lumber prices have gone down $576. This is from January to about $410 per unit. So we do see some building costs coming down. And since we have a pathway to do this without having to raise debt, let's keep sharpening our pencils. But I don't think we have to work as hard to shrink the size of the building. This is what the town wanted. This is what they voted for. This is what we went into debt, $7.5 million. This is what we got our $10 million grant for. Let's try to keep what we promised to the residents. And then when we get hard numbers, then I think we have to come back and look and see what the real numbers are and kind of stop all the speculation on numbers.
Sure.
We know there's a pathway out there. Now let's get to work and really find out what we have to pay for this.
Okay.
Part of the process here is the process of architecture and construction management allows you to try to estimate costs as you go along and our drawings get more detailed and more developed so that you're not surprised when you open the bids and unprepared. So that's part of the goal for this process. To just let you know at these phase milestones where we think costs are.
And then just quick follow-up on that. Other than the building shrinking about 10%, the only other major component that's not part of it is the track. Everything else is just a modification of
Everything else is like an infrastructure change or a material change.
We're not giving up a lobby, we're just making it a little smaller. We're
Correct.
not giving up a gym, we're just making it a little bit different. We're not giving
Correct.
up locker rooms, we're just
No.
making them smaller.
That's correct.
Okay. I think the board's had a chance to talk. Do we have any public comments? We do have another public meeting after this, but do we have any public comments on this? Okay, any last comments from the board? Trustee Kumar?
Just a quick question about the basketball court we lost. I know the track is gone, we all understood, we had that discussion. The basketball court, is that just because you're not putting in a basketball court? Is the gym size shrunk or the gym size the same?
Went from 3 to 2.
The gym size is smaller. However, the basketball court originally, the original design had a large high school size competition basketball court. That's still the floor plan, but the north-south, the length of the gym was long enough to put 3 small cross basketball courts. In discussion with staff, we shrank the length a little bit. You still have the competition basketball high school with 10-foot clearance around, but there isn't the extra space at the ends, so there's 2 small basketball cross courts
Okay,
over
so
top of that
So
overlap.
there's the two, essentially if we're having, because the little kids play on the smaller courts, right?
Correct, correct.
So you'll be running 2 programs instead of 3.
At the same time, correct,
same time.
correct.
Okay. Okay,
Let's go.
okay. All right, so we'll look forward to having you guys out here again, and hopefully the end of February. As soon as we can get these, hopefully numbers start coming down by then. For adjournment?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, do we have a motion to adjourn out of our COW? Trustee Kozar?
I'll make that motion.
Seconds, trustee Solella? Clerk Konecki? Or no? Yeah, all in favor? Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will close that, and we will next open up our meeting on the tax levy. We'll give everybody a couple of minutes if they need to make a quick stop, and we will come back.